Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Sales Hacker webinar. Thank you all so much for taking the time to hop on with us today. We have a very relevant topic to speak to, especially moving into 2022. And we have the right people here today to speak to this. They've taken the time out of their day to bless us with their expertise and knowledge. So I'm super excited to learn. I'm here to learn from these guys. And share any kind of my own insights as well. My name is Mikey Harrison. I'll be moderating the conversation today. I'm the partnerships manager at Sales Hacker. So everybody, thank you so much for taking the time to join us because we do all of these for the community. And I'm really excited for an awesome conversation. So today, what we're talking about, very relevant, like I mentioned, moving into 2022, it seems like everybody is hiring right now. So our topic today is faster onboarding equals faster results, reduce ramp time. A constant conversation topic with all organizations. So really excited to hear what you guys have to say today and get into it. So before we get into the conversation, I want to introduce our panelists here today. Lindsay, Catherine, and Chris, thank you so much for taking the hour today to bless us with your knowledge. Very happy for you guys to be here. Welcome.
Happy to be here.
Thank you.
Awesome. Cool, guys. Well, before we go into the conversation, I do like to get a bit of background on each of you guys so we can get a bit more acquainted and kind of get a bit more, get to know you a bit more for our audience. So, Chris, I'll start off with you. Chris, the Director of Sales Development at Ambition. Please just give us a bit of background on yourself, who you are, where you're coming from.
For sure. Well, thanks for everybody for joining today. This is going to be a fun topic and conversation. Like Mikey said, I'm with Ambition. We're sales performance management, coaching, and gamification platform for sales teams. And I've been with Ambition for about 2 years. Been managing sales teams for about 6. And just really excited about this conversation today. It's definitely near and dear to my heart. Fortunately, this year we have quadrupled the size of Ambition's sales development function. So I've been really focused on this topic and trying to be the best onboarding advocate as possible. So
awesome, Chris. You say did you say doubled?
Quadrupled.
Quadrupled.
Yeah.
Holy moly.
We are a much smaller team than probably Lindsay and Catherine have, but still it's quite a bit of scale for us, and we still have like 9 positions open. So it's been wild.
Fantastic. That's super exciting. I love being a part of the hyper growth stage there, right? So, Chris, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it. I'm super excited to hear what you have to say as well. Okay, moving on. Lindsay Boggs is the Global Director of Sales at LucidWorks. Lindsay, please just give us a bit of background on yourself. And again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I've been in sales for over a decade. I've been in sales leadership for over half of that time. I've been at LucidWorks since June. I have a team of 9 SDRs, and we cover all of the US, LATAM, Canada, and UK. And I'm really excited to be here and talk about this topic.
Cool. Awesome. I'm excited to have you and learn from you. So thank you again for taking the time. And last but not least, Catherine Wilson. She's the Senior Manager, Global Solutions of Onboarding Strategy at Salesforce. Catherine, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. And please just give us a bit of background on yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. As you said, my title is Global Solutions Onboarding at Salesforce. So I actually represent more of the solution side of this conversation. However, my entire career has been spent in onboarding, minus the tiny stint I did as an SE. And I live and breathe all things onboarding. I love the psychology behind it. I think this past 2 years has been really interesting to see how the market's adjusted and how everyone is now having this conversation. So I'm super happy to share, what I've learned over the last 6.5 years. And yeah, super happy to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here, Catherine. I really, we appreciate it. And again, thank you all three for taking the time today. I know an hour here today is big. So that's fantastic. I'm super excited to jump into it. Okay. So before we launch and dive into the conversation, we're going to have a very organic conversation. And everyone, remember, we do these guys for you. So if you have any questions, this is your chance to throw it in the Q&A and ask these panelists. Plus, we always find that drives the most engaging conversation. So please, any questions in the Q&A? Fantastic. Now, before we dive into our first topic of discussion, I do want to run a quick poll just to get a bit of a pulse on how everybody else is kind of working out their onboarding process. So I'm going to quickly launch it here. So average ramp time. What's the average ramp time at your organization? I'll give a couple minutes here just to get it. What do you think is going to be the number one? We got 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month.
I feel like 1 month is the, I don't know, either 1 month or longer. Those are going to be split.
That's what I would say.
I'm going with 3 weeks.
3 weeks. Oh, it's looking pretty close here. Okay, got it. Yeah, I'm kind of with you on the 1 month to maybe longer. I know I mentioned in the beginning of the in our pre-call here that I've been on both sides where it's gets thrown directly into it, within 2 weeks, or take a long period to really understand the product before you go for it. So, I'm not really sure what the best process is. I can kind of say what has worked best for me, but as a whole.
Which one of those did you do first? Because I feel like if you've ever been thrown in, you kind of can't go back from that. Like you crave that after that. So which one was first?
You're right. So the first one, it was a month long. So it was a 3 to 4 week period of just understanding what we're doing and then just getting thrown into it. Whereas most recently was kind of a 2 week. I was on calls from my first day and then pretty much just slowly started taking them on. Which I don't know. I think there was greatness to both of them. Right. So I'm not too sure what is the right way, but cool. Okay, so we have I'll give it about 10 more seconds here before I end the poll and we can see what we got here. Okay.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Can you guys, okay, I'll just share the results here. So as you can see, 41% said longer. It'd be great to throw in the chat, understand how long, if you did vote for longer. But then again, yeah, it does look like 1 month or longer is the average there, which, I think
that makes my heart happy.
Yeah, it makes sense.
That makes my heart happy.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Cool. Well, thank you all for participating in that. Just it's great to kind of get an understanding of the pulse in the room. And let's dive into it here. Okay. So. Okay, to start this conversation off, I want to start off with to get an understanding from you guys. How have you been able to create onboarding experiences? I know a lot of onboarding experiences at many organizations tend to utilize the same onboarding process for each cohort of new individuals coming on. How have you been able to differentiate that onboarding process? Like, do you put all your reps through the same process? Do you try and maximize that process to focus on their skills and strengths? What does that look like for you? And I'll start off with Chris there.
Yeah, I think for us, it's been a bit of a hybrid approach. So certainly in the process, there's things that are pretty standard for us. So we have a playbook that outlines most of the procedures that are going to be really important to success in the role. And so we have them, really digging into that playbook, and that process is pretty standard. So I would say in general, week one is very somewhat scripted. And then throughout that week, we begin really doing some discovery on, based on these individuals' prior skill sets, kind of what they're bringing to the table, what are some of their strengths and weaknesses, and then how do we need to pivot in week two to really address some of those things they may be struggling with, or cut back on the things they may be doing really well. So that's kind of how we've approached it. Is week one is pretty standard and scripted, and then we pivot for future weeks based on how week one went.
Got it. So the first week is kind of more product knowledge, understanding everything, and then you kind of start to focus in on the actual skill sets.
That's right. They'll do a lot of shadowing and role playing and things like that beginning in week 2.
Got it. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, that's been pretty similar to my experiences as well. Catherine, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I've been in both situations where, you want things to be as high touch and as one-on-one as possible, right? The end goal, a dream world would be every single person gets a completely unique, individualized to them for their experience plan. However, that's not scalable. And it's not necessarily best practice for consistency. So, my research brain says that I really do like to have some sort of controlling variable across onboarding to say, what part of this is working or not? Is it the content? Is it the activities? Is it the curriculum? Or is it in fact the manager that's actually the reason that this person's might have been so successful? But keeping some things the same across also allows you to see, how different personalities and different levels of experience come into play. I don't necessarily love the one size fits all, because it's not fun if you're coming in, potentially with 20 years of experience from a competitor. And I don't want you to have the exact same onboarding experience as someone who has never done this before. This is their first job, or they just switched from a different industry. So it's a huge balance. I know that the classic consulting answer is it depends. But I do really like a consistent plan, knowing that managers and or the individual themselves are going to flex based on how things are going. So I really like what you said with, you kind of flex things based on how they're doing. I love the idea of some sort of stand and deliver, some sort of assessment there. I think keeping the curriculum constant, but then allowing, the use cases or the feedback or the style to flex based on the individual is really where you hit the sweet spot.
Cool. Yeah. I think that's a great approach. Have you ever so for one time for me, I was like tested on almost like a weekly basis to see where I was at almost. Have you ever utilized something like that?
To me, that's like way overkill for so many reasons. One, my first question is, I would love to see what they did with that. What were they? Where did that data live? Did they ever use it? Were they ever looking at the answers? It's the same with weekly feedback or daily feedback. If you're not going to use it, don't ask for it. And 2, man, I bet you were so fatigued, and so knowing like when the end of the week came and you knew it was about to happen, like that's such an unfortunate place to be in during this experience. So I'm there for testing only when it makes sense and when it's to prove that a certain behavior has been reached. Not at all for, I don't know. I might not be popular in that opinion, but for me, like in onboarding and in enablement, I'm very picky about when I choose to test and assess.
Got it. Yeah, like it was an interesting process for me. Coming out of because it was my first job out of university, so I was like, hey, I feel like I'm kind of in university for the first month.
Yeah, it probably felt like university.
But it did work. I was really.
I was going to say, did you retain it?
By the time I was on calls, it was there. Everything was kind of pretty locked in because I put so much energy into it. But I've had other processes that might have been better for my skill set per se, right? Lindsay, I would love to hear your thoughts on the onboarding process and kind of what that looks like for you guys.
Yeah, it was interesting with my onboarding process. We had 2 SDRs start with me on the exact same day, and so I like to know everything before I onboard people at the same time. So it was a little bit like, oh my gosh, I'm not in control. I am not onboarding them. They are onboarding with me. So once I got my feet under me, I was able to onboard the next class of people, and I felt more in control, if that makes sense. But a typical onboarding experience, I like to do low-hanging fruit the first couple weeks. So I like to make them feel like they're moving the needle on things they can control, like doing personal branding right out of the gate, doing LinkedIn makeovers. I'm looking at my sheet right now. Learning business acumen. So a lot of the people that we are hiring are right out of college. So learning things like technology, just overall technology, how computers work, little like big things like that. Understanding technology as a whole, and just trying to move the needle a little bit at a time versus learning LucidWorks as a whole, because putting them on Gong right away could be completely overwhelming if they don't understand the words inside of Gong that they're learning along the way. Teaching a class just on acronyms of what they're going to be hearing the next several weeks, because I realized my first job out of college, the first week, somebody sent me an email saying, could you please send this to me EOD? And I was like, what is EOD? And I got scolded for not knowing what EOD was. And I'll never forget that. Little things like that. You don't know what EOD means right out of college. And so I have to remember where people are coming from and put that lens on.
Yeah. Especially in this tech world, the acronyms are endless. So, you know,
Those TLAs really kill you.
Exactly. There's probably a bunch out there right now where I'm just like, what is that? And I've been in this world for a while, right? So it's like, I totally get that, Lindsay. So in our poll, we did get a couple, actually a few answers that said 2 weeks in terms of, onboarding process. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's like, that's way too early, or do you think there's some benefit to, hopping on and getting thrown into the mix to kind of start getting reps in? Chris, what are your thoughts on that?
I think a lot of that depends on what you might be selling. If the solution is very technical, and maybe your buyer is a very technical buyer, you want the reps to feel very comfortable before they're pitching a very difficult solution to sell.
Yeah.
I think if it's not as technical, I think there's a ton of value in going ahead and getting some live at bats early. That's why I said we do a lot of shadowing and role playing in week 2. We also mix in there some live calls as well, and certainly take our time and do a lot of call coaching after a small call blitz or something like that. But I think there is some value in going ahead, getting into the live motion early on. I've heard of some teams like even having them make calls, but not to prospects, calling to other businesses and trying to sell them something that you don't normally sell. So I think there's a lot of creative strategies around just getting in that live motion. Yeah.
Yeah. I like what you said around the technical aspect of the conversation, because I've worked in security and compliance, which, in a way, I'm not an expert at that. So I don't really know the depth of what that goes into. So there was a lot more learning before hopping onto a call with somebody, right? Whereas other areas where I've been on, it's pretty cut and dry. You kind of know what you're kind of selling. So it's, it did benefit to kind of hop right into it and start that, getting reps, understanding what our prospects are asking us on a regular occurrence, right? So I can kind of formulate a better structure. But I totally agree with you there. Lindsay, what are your thoughts on kind of throwing reps into it right away like that?
There's that phrase, fail hard and fail fast. And I think there is some merit to that. Some people will oftentimes I think everyone can vouch for being incredibly nervous before your very, very first cold call. And sometimes people just want to rip the Band-Aid off and get it over with and just be done with it. And I'll never forget my first cold call. And I'm sure everyone on this call can remember their first cold call. So just get it done. Just be done with it. And the more you practice, I tell my team all the time, you can rehearse and practice and role play for 12 months until you pick up the phone and actually make that very first cold call. That's when you learn the most. So there is some merit to picking up the phone sooner.
Yeah, I love that. And Nathan Greenspan in the chat just posted, I just pretend that I'm calling my grandma.
I love that. I love
You
that.
must have a really hip
And
grandma.
Yeah, another thing that I like to think of too when I am doing that is the fact that it's a person on the other side of the line, right? It's not, it's just another person like you, right? So, treat them like another person, right?
Right.
I've always found it being a lot more organic and fluid instead of like, hey, I'm calling you out of the blue and I want to sell you something. So yeah, I like that approach. And another thing too is, after a bad cold call, the number one thing you can do is pick up the phone and make your next one, right?
100%.
Because then you're just going to continue to, you'll move past that much faster, to say the least, right? Because the more you sit in it and think about it, the more you psych yourself out. What about you, Catherine, on the kind of?
So I'm like pretty against just blanket, like I need to have someone onboarded in this amount of weeks. So to me, whenever I hear that from a leader or from a manager, my first thought is, what's behind that? Like what's the reason for this arbitrary date? However, I do think, what you can do in 2 weeks or in a short amount of time is to your point, Lindsay, think about like, what is the goal of, what do I want out of this 2 weeks? And then how many practice reps can we get in before then? So I think that's where you start the conversation is like, what do I want out of whatever this, period looks like? And then backing into, okay, how do I make sure that when that day comes, if we're going to do that, that this person is ready to succeed and we've set them up for success. I practice on anything, the person behind you. I think the best sales reps and the ones that when I meet right away and I know coming in when I see them in onboarding are the ones that they're so comfortable with just slipping into role play in the middle of a conversation. And that's when I know, like, all right, you're like, if you're not ready, you're so confident that the prospect will think you're ready. Everyone will know you're ready.
Yeah.
And so to that point, it's once you understand what you want out of it. If it's 2 weeks, okay. So is that a cold call in 2 weeks? Are we having a first opti meeting? Are we doing like what is this? And then backing into that to say, let's get you as many at bats as possible. That's really the name of the game with onboarding is low risk, very, very, sorry, I should add that asterisk, low risk at bats. I'll say my first day at Salesforce as a solutions engineer, I went to go shadow, which is hilarious. You don't shadow like a trade event, shadow a booth. And you don't shadow a booth. I'm laughing because literally people were walking up to me asking questions and I'm like, hi, it's day one for me. So by the end of the day, I mean, I said a lot of lies on accident, but by the end of the day, I'd memorized the guy standing next to me's pitch and was able to give it and was able to, ruminate it on the way home and learned what I was actually saying. So it's possible, like the worst thing that'll come out of throwing your feet to the fire is you get a little bit burnt. But if you can't, like, I think that's also a really good, and I'm not saying we should haze people. I'm not throwing that out there, but understanding how someone reacts to that situation, to that very first time, is really telling too. So I definitely don't recommend putting people in uncomfortable situations just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
But it's really not that scary once you're in it. 'Cause like you said, Mikey, we're all just talking to people who have a job just like us.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. And to add to what you just mentioned there about, a booth, and Jamie even mentioned it, a booth is one of the best way to workshop a pitch. That couldn't be more true. I remember my first time going to a conference and it's like in that one day, I did the pitch maybe upwards of 250 times. So then you start to kind of alter it to be like, okay, what worked and what didn't? Okay, this is much easier, much more succinct. And then you kind of start to do that. And then once I went back to in office, it was kind of much more, structured and not structured, but just clean cut, right? And it's like point and just much more effective, right?
I think I told someone at that time I was working in our small business segment, which was like companies with 500 employees or less. And I told someone that I worked with any company that had 500,000 employees or less, which is like every company. Yeah. So it just, you brush it off. It's low risk, little like, diet sized at bats with low risk is the best way to do anything in 2 weeks if you have to.
Yeah, totally. And I even started doing them like in my personal life, right? So it's like even when I was just talking to my girlfriend or my dad or something like that, just kind of honing it in a bit, even when they ask, so what do you do? Right.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, there's an at
Great
bat. Right?
question.
Yeah. Great question.
That's one thing I tell my reps all the time is maybe when they get to week 3 or week 4, they feel like they start knowing the product really well. They start using a bunch of jargon. And I say, hey, your prospect doesn't know what you're talking about here. You know, how do you describe this solution to your mom? You know, if they'd ask you, like, where do you work again? Like, what do you do?
Mhm.
That should be a little bit closer to what your pitch is than all of this jargon.
Totally. Right. I couldn't agree with that more. Before we move on to our next topic here, I want one more question that's more for myself. Have you ever utilized in the past like a buddy system, right? Where SDRs with AEs or, you know, AEs with success managers or something like that. Have you ever used that? Have you ever utilized that kind of process? Because I know for some other friends of mine, peers and so on, they are matched directly with an account executive and that's how they go about. Lindsay, have you ever kind of experienced that process?
I have, but I have found that when it's assigned, it's not as effective as when it's organic.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. When it's organic, it's much more effective because they have sought out an AE that they just mesh better with than the one that I assign them to. So for whatever reason, it's worked better when I say, go reach out to all of the AEs and introduce yourself. And then whichever conversation you seem to remember the most, or whichever one you seem to align with the most, I want you to, continue that, cadence and work with them. But you're going to always have a dedicated AE you're going to work with, but I want you to partner with them more and pick their brain and create a buddy system. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes I've even noticed too, is like, if you are working with a technical kind of product and multiple offerings, some might be more knowledgeable and more equipped for certain areas, right? So attaching on to those for those specific conversations, I think can be super helpful as well.
Sure.
Chris, what are your thoughts on that? Have you ever experienced kind of the buddy system per se?
Yeah, I think this is extremely valuable, especially now that we're not all in the office together, or many of us are not. Having that go-to person who is not your manager, that you can ask really any question to is super important. I haven't kicked this off yet, but the next iteration of that here at Ambition, fortunately, my idea is to connect a brand new SDR with an SDR here at the company who's been promoted into another role, maybe AE or CSM, so that they directly have that perspective of, hey, I've been in this role actually recently. I've been promoted out of this role. Here's what it takes to be successful. So that's kind of the next version that I'd like to implement here.
Yeah, cool. I love that. That's awesome. Catherine, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's actually the buddy system or pairing or mentors or, onboarding buddies. That's something I will not use. I don't create an onboarding plan that doesn't have either one person or multiple people that are assigned throughout with very specific roles and responsibilities. So, hey, I've chosen you for this. I want you to connect on this aspect. I also find that I really like your approach, Lindsay, with the kind of more organic, because that's also a really great way for them to kind of pitch themselves and understand, how they connect with different people. I've used it in the past as also a really good kind of leadership test for someone who wants to be in management or wants to be more of a senior lead, a senior sales rep, to say, okay, if that's something that you see in your future, then I'm going to offload some of this onboarding, onto you. I think it's most successful when paired with a network. So, and this is something that I think every manager should be doing this, where, when I have someone coming in, I've got a list of people from across the company that I've already asked, are you open to having a conversation with my new rep? Mm-hmm. And when you guys are talking, I've specifically chosen you for this reason. I want you to talk about this. From you, I want him to learn X. And then that also creates accountability on, afterwards, what did you learn from this person? So kind of doing both of, I'm assigning you one person that's going to be your go-to. I think it's so necessary to have someone outside of a manager, because anytime I'm new, I purposefully spread my questions out to as many people as I can, so one person doesn't know how stupid I am. And that's what I tell every rep to do. It's because you're going to learn, ask the same question to different people, but spread it out and learn what they know and what they're bringing to the table. It then creates this organic network that you have for the rest of your career. So to me, it's when you put those two things together, the buddy system. I love the cross-functional buddy systems of, hey, I want you to AE, I want you to shadow an SE, I want you to shadow a CSM, because you need to know what happens when the account's in red or when the account's in trouble. You need to know what happens when you punt the ball over here. You need to understand why product tells you not to say this thing that you always want to say. Like the wider that they can have roots in, the earlier, is also what will keep them more actually committed to the company too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like utilize the assets, right? People are there to help. They want this company to be successful, so they want their reps and SDRs and AEs to be just as successful, right? So, and you're so right. The SDR conversation to the account executive conversation to the success conversation is very different. So if you understand how those work, then you can actually build the groundwork and the expectations moving into the next steps, right?
We've also, in the commercial space where the deals are a little bit smaller, one thing I've also seen really well done, one of my favorite RVPs, it was understood that if you were a formal onboarding buddy, you would be splitting deals with your onboarding buddy, and for a certain amount of time. So it was a way to make sure that the opti doesn't fail. It's low risk. We've always got, a safety net here. This person is financially getting something out of helping. They've got skin in the game too. So they don't want to see this fail. And doing that slowly, tapering that off so that A, the risk is low, B, they get a chance to shine too. I think some people kind of, shy away from, I don't want to lose any of my commission. It also just fosters this entire culture of inclusivity and, learning from the get-go. But I've seen reps do that, in one of my RVPs did that very successfully.
Cool. Awesome. Love that. I've got a question in the Q&A here from Clarissa. What kind of soft skills do you teach to someone who's an experienced seller and not new to the industry? Chris, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, I guess the first few things that come to mind here is just, if someone comes in with a level of experience, like, I think it's super important that they're coachable from day one, because sure, they have a lot of experience from whatever industry or whatever that came before, but things could be different in this environment. So I think the mindset of being open to learn and listen is really important for someone in that seat. Yeah, that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Totally. No, I totally agree. Lindsay, do you have any thoughts on that?
That was the thing that I was gonna say. I'll have to think of something else. I would say being vulnerable on accepting and giving feedback would be another one. Being able to show up to a call review and know that it's a safe space, and knowing that we are all in this together, and being able to bring a call, digest it, understand that it's a safe space, and being open to feedback and receiving feedback and giving feedback as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Catherine, anything on that one to add?
They both. Just the only thing I would add is really just there's a certain way that, when we say soft skills, we all have ideas in mind of, is it presenting, is it communication, is it business acumen? Every company has their flavor of doing that, and that's really what you're there to learn. So I think it's important to have a healthy dose of acknowledgement that the reason we hired you, the reason we are expending the cost of onboarding you as a person, is because your experience, and we acknowledge these things about you. However, there's a way that we like to do things here. I'm not saying your way is not valid, but again, there's a way we like to do things here. We want you to be open to that. Have a healthy dose of bringing your experience in, but I think that's really the way I've framed soft skills in the past with folks who, come in with more experience than I have in years of being alive. And so that's really my way of kind of coding that is, but I think what soft skills, it's really, presenting. They're now the face of your company, the face of your product. So can you have a lucid conversation, an independent conversation with a goal and an ask afterwards? And just really how your company does that is the only difference between all of this, right?
Yeah, totally. And that's the thing too, as an SDR, you are the face of the company, right? You're the first interaction that they're having. So, you want that to be as impactful as possible, right? Okay. I want to talk about the tech stack when onboarding. Okay. So I know this is super crucial, especially in this hybrid world, right? Working from home. I feel like the tech that is used for onboarding is even more so than it was pre-pandemic. So I would love to, I'll start off with you, Lindsay, because I know you mentioned, using Gong and throwing your reps right into that. What does the tech stack look like, for your team to help aid the ramping period? Like how important is the proper tech for your reps when onboarding them?
Yeah, it's definitely very important. We use Gong, like I mentioned. We use something called work patterns, which helps with onboarding, tracking their assignments that are due, tracking tasks that are due, tracking our one-on-ones and our staff meetings. We have a sales automation platform, of course. We have Salesforce, of course, and Asana. So lots of different tech stacks that we have. But I would say the norm is that we use them on a consistent basis, and frequent feedback is also important for me. And that's how we use work patterns. And definitely daily check-ins, daily huddles, communication is key.
Got it. And do most of the, when you're bringing in a new cohort of reps, do they all utilize the same process and the same kind of stack throughout that?
Yeah, yes, they do. And my ultimate goal is to bring in SDRs at the same time. And I would be curious to hear from Chris and Catherine too, if you bring in cohorts at the same time. I really prefer to bring in people at the same time versus hiring a one-off, because it's so much easier to bring in people together versus a one-off. So it's curious to hear from them as well.
Cost the same amount of time.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you also have that, that you have somebody in the same position as you can kind of go back and forth with, try and kind of
have a buddy.
Like the buddy system, except at the same level, right?
Yeah.
Chris, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yep. It's if you have the luxury of bringing people in cohorts, like definitely do that. To your point, Mikey, like the camaraderie that's built is so crucial there with that class. And then we will use that to like run competitions and whatnot, and like say, okay, well, you guys are a team now, and you're going to be competing against some more veteran reps, and all, we'll make it even. But yeah, it goes a long way for them to have that buddy system early on.
Yeah.
And I've always been a very competitive person growing up playing sports and all that stuff too. So I definitely thrive when I have, someone to work against, but also, it's not all competitive. We all want to be as successful as possible, and you want your peers to be as well. But having that extra kind of push, we're all seeing each other. How many meetings have you booked? I've booked this. Okay, I got to ramp it up here, So it's good like that. Catherine, what are your thoughts there?
I love a cohort. I live for a cohort. I've for so many reasons, the camaraderie 100%, the scalability 100%. And we're talking about people getting at-bats at sales. As an onboarder, I also need at-bats to learn. So the more people or kind of, micro experiments, kind of guinea pig groups I can do to learn from, the better. Because the one-offs I don't know if their experience is different because that's them. I don't know if it's because of the time of year. So I love a cohort. Chris, I also really want to learn more about, I want to hear your answer to the tech stack question, because correct me if I'm wrong, you that is your company in
Yeah.
essence.
Yeah.
I love the idea of gamification. So I want to hear, what you do, or kind of your pitch on your company, why I should be using your company.
Why, thank
Because I'm
you.
telling you, my list
Yeah.
of tech, I'll answer after you. My list of tech is not very impressive.
Yeah. So yeah, to answer your question, it's been a huge benefit for us using our own tool. And I won't talk forever, but I'll go through the kind of like the main highlight points. So number one, I think it's so important for onboarding reps to have a clear understanding of what a good day and what a bad day looks like for them. So when they finish that first day, like, did I do well today? And so your organization, like, figure out what are those like KPIs that they have control over. Early on, it might be modules completed or, things like that. All the way working up to week 2, it's how many demos did you sit on, or how many cold calls did you make? How many emails did you send? I think, what Ambition will help do is scorecard all that out for you. And those scorecards can ramp up based on where you expect them to be week 1, week 2, week 3. And so it gives that clear picture on a weighted scale of 0 to 100. And you can put multiple metrics in there on what a good day and what a bad day looks like. So they're shooting for 100 score on their scorecard on a daily basis. And so that's the first thing, is just being really clear about what good looks like early on in the role.
I love that.
The number 2, and I think this is maybe one of the most important pieces, is celebrating early wins. Because, those SDRs are not going to be setting meetings, in week 2, week 3, maybe not even week 4. Some are, but so I think with Ambition's platform, you could send alerts to Slack or Microsoft Teams that celebrate, hey, Nolan added 30 prospects into a sequence today. Like, for him, that was his prospecting goal. Let's shout him out for that. His first meeting set, like, let's make a big deal about that. First pipeline opportunity. And so celebrating those wins early on, because Mikey's point earlier, you can go for a week without setting a meeting, and you start thinking in your head, maybe I'm bad at this. Like, maybe I'm not cut out for sales. But those little wins that you celebrate are going to keep them in the game, keeping them wanting more. So that's the second piece. And then the third function of the platform that's super beneficial is the one-on-one coaching platform. So it's going to help document those conversations, track progress over time, and just making sure that the rep is having that good one-on-one time with their manager. And to Lindsay's point, like, we integrate with Kong as well, so we could pull in those call recordings so that you can coach live within the platform.
It's like a container that kind of, I really like I love what you said at the beginning about, it's so important to know what a good day and a bad day is. And the idea of like a tech platform, or just, whether it's someone telling you on a piece of paper, or just something that says, this is what you're supposed to feel like at the end of the day if you've done these things, and that it tracks that. I think, like, when I think about tech, that's one of the things that you guys have mentioned. One, Gong being able to service, like, okay, how do I actually perform as a sales rep? I definitely rely heavily on, especially in this remote world, like a virtual stand and deliver, right? Like, I think we use Level Jump. I'm not entirely sure why we as a company decided to make that choice. Also, like, just asterisk, safe harbor, I represent no financial statements or whatever of Salesforce. No idea why and it allows us to say, hey, we're gonna do a practice scenario. It's not just gonna be, and we're gonna record it, and we're gonna put it in a place where other people can see it and comment on it. So some sort of stand and deliver is huge for us. And then I'd be interested to hear how you use Salesforce, Lindsay. I've used it not only for tracking activities and just showing them literally this is where you're going to be selling and how you're going to be living your day, but also as a learner CRM. So whether it's Salesforce or a Google Sheet or Excel or some sort of document, whatever the tech is, the thing I want it to do is catalog who are my onboarders, and what's their progress like over time. So if, when did they start? When are they? What's the date they're supposed to be hitting certain milestones? Have they done those? Have they not? Kind of as a collective, if a manager wants to pipe in and say, hey, Mikey, I shadowed a call you were on last week, and I saw you did really well. How long have when did you get hired? What have you done? Or vice versa. Mikey, I shadowed a call, and man, I really think you could use some more practice in this. And going back and looking at that record and saying, oh, well, he spent like 16 hours in presenting with a purpose. I think someone needs to talk to Mikey about presenting with purpose. That kind of stuff. So just the tech for me is really like, does it do something that I need it to? Does it facilitate a conversation, and does it track that conversation? And to your point, assessing someone's performance or someone's progress.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned, my list is very Salesforce, Google Sheets, or we use Quip, which allows you to be collaborative. And any sort of LMS, I would say, if you're looking for a tech, or when you're evaluating tech, LMS is obviously very important in onboarding. But when you're doing so, make sure to look at the ability to track against some sort of curriculum, or some sort of ability to say, did they complete this? And then how does this completion of this thing tie to their individual record? That's really what I think about. I can't help myself as an SE, but digging into how things are integrated and related in that area.
Mm-hmm. Totally. So I know like a lot of reps that when they're coming on to a new organization from where they've been in the past, and what they've used in the past, right? So for instance, they use a different CRM than what your company would do, or a different engagement process that your company would do. Have you ever made exceptions to bring on tech for those people that are used to using this and will be probably like ramping and performing quicker because they already know how to utilize all of that tech outside of what you currently are using? Or is that a no-go at your work? What do you? I'll start with Lindsay there.
I have a situation right now where somebody has been used to using a certain platform where I'm evaluating it because of that, but I'm not discounting it at all because I think it's great. I'm evaluating it, and it's because of this person that I'm looking at it. So we might actually end up going with it because of this person's experience with it. So I'm all about listening to my reps because they're the most experienced with what's out there.
Yeah. And I think also even in this, like again, in this remote world, onboarding has become quite difficult too. So I would think that maybe that could play a role into kind of opening up, the horizons to potentially new tech that has been used, lesser involvement per se in terms of teaching the tech on how to use it, and more on kind of, okay, here's product, this is what we need to do, and this is how we're gonna go about it. Chris, do you have any thoughts on that?
Never encountered that scenario myself, but like Lindsay said, I'd be open to it, depending on the type of solution. It would be hard to make big changes to tools that are really embedded in your process, but if it's a lighter weight tool, potentially, yeah. Got it.
And I'm assuming, Catherine, that you're probably on the similar boat as Chris.
No, I would say, I like cringe when I hear that from, the position that I've kind of been trained in and spending 6.5 years at Salesforce. There's like absolutely no way that we would, adopt something because of one person. 100% open to like, oh, what's the benefit of that? But the likelihood of that reaching the level of procurement is nothing. And more than that, I guess there are massive security implications when it comes to something that's not licensed or not, vetted by. So for those reasons, I also being like a security compliant data nerd, my skin crawls a little bit when I think about like someone deciding to, run a call or do anything from their own personal account from something. Super open to, oh, that's, from doing my job better day to day. Did that thing help you do this, track your activities better? If it's licensed, cool. That's great if it's vetted. But yeah, that's a no for me, dog.
Yeah. No, I love it. And I get it. I agree, right? The only reason why I asked is I had a conversation a couple weeks ago with a colleague or a peer of mine, and a big deciding factor on going with a certain organization was the tech that they were using, right? So I was like, okay, well, what if this rep is very, you really want this person on your team, but the other company wants them as well, and they have the stuff that they're used to. So I just wondering if that's ever kind of come up in
But like, put yourself, I guess, as any business owner.
Yeah.
Maybe this is why I'm not a business owner. Any business owner, if I have a sales rep who's kind of giving me an ultimatum from the get-go of like, hey, I'm going to go with this other company because they use this tech that I'm used to. Like, if that is so important to you, that's great, and you have every right to make that decision for you coming to my company. However, this is the tech that I have chosen to purchase as a business owner is not up for negotiation. I guess when we're recruiting is more my response to that.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm with you. I'm on the same page. And also, for
we're
me,
adults.
Right. For me, though, it's like the more tech and more stuff I'm actually familiar with and can use, the more valuable I am. Right. So
you're going to pay me to learn this? Cool.
Exactly. Great. And the more knowledgeable I'm in within the space too, right? Because especially in this, sales tech world, you might be selling to a lot of the customers that you're actually using, right? So it can really help there. Okay, we got 5 minutes left, guys, and I do want to hop on to one kind of topic on the feedback aspect and how you guys go about that within your org to provide that constructive feedback to your reps, and then also reps to their colleagues. I know feedback is everything in terms of onboarding people. I've been in both sides where I had over feedback too much, and then some where it was never even there, so I didn't really know where to go. How have you created a culture for productive feedback for your reps, within your teams and so on? Chris, I'll start with you there.
Yeah, I mean, I think early on it's about setting the tone that you're there for feedback, positive or negative. And so I think if you set that tone early, then not everybody's going to be open to it, but then providing multiple forums for them to give that feedback. We'll do anonymous surveys. We'll get feedback from their mentor that they work with. We've got one-on-one sessions with myself. So we try to get it in a lot of different ways. I think one of the biggest challenges, I think, given the remote hybrid kind of work situation we're all in, is what we've lost is that moment where you're sitting in the office with your coworkers and you've got a really small question and you're like, "Hey, Catherine, how do you handle this? How do you do this?" Right. And that's something that they're not particularly going to go Slack their manager or Slack their coworker to figure that out. And so that bit of feedback or that question just like sits there and doesn't get answered. And so I think finding ways to even get the small things out are really important. One of the things I tested was doing like an office hours session. It's like a 2-hour block in the afternoon where I'm just on a Zoom call like this. You can pop in, you can pop out, and just that they know that they can, get any question answered at that point. That was pretty effective. So I would just say like lean into that communication, that feedback, try to figure out how best to learn as much as you can from your reps.
Yeah. Totally. And that's the one thing that I can also relate to in terms of, if you have a question on products, which, I'm not a product manager, so I don't really know the ins and outs, where, back in the office, you can stand up, walk over, get the answer like that and have it in your follow-up email within, 10 minutes. Right. Whereas it can be a bit more difficult in the virtual space. So I totally get that. Catherine, what are your thoughts on, providing a feedback loop for your
first of all, I think it's super imperative to set the tone, as you mentioned up front, that like this is going to be you shouldn't be surprised when you get feedback, good and bad. This is our culture. Just set the stage. You don't know anything different. But two, it also means that you have to give guidance to the company or to the team who's going to be giving feedback on this is what good feedback looks like. This is what productive feedback looks like. And then three, to your point, Chris, we lose the swivel chair, like, what does this mean? Or how do I do this? We also lose the moments after a meeting when you're walking to the car, you're on the plane, you're talking about, you're debriefing and you're like, how did that go? Or we had all that time to sit there and think about things and to talk about things through. Oh, you thought I really thought that went well when you said that, blah, blah, blah. So I encourage everyone to carve that out, knowing that, and I tell my reps every time you're getting reverse shadowed as you're onboarding, that's a huge thing we do. I'm going to put someone that's experienced on the call shadow you. We're going to block 15 minutes afterwards for feedback. But I really push my SEs. When we talk about feedback, from a manager, from a peer, but also for me with SEs, I care a lot about feedback from my AEs. I want to know, hey, how did that go? The customer, what was their response? What were they thinking? So for my SEs, I'm pushing you. I want you to walk away from every demo with a Post-it note of 2 things that you did really well, and 1 thing, even if it's the tiniest, you went too fast when you were introducing yourself, something like that. So it's setting up the culture to feedback is going to happen. It's blocking the time to actually allow feedback to happen. And then it's also telling your reps, like, hey, this is also on you. And if you don't think you're getting feedback, that's on you. Come ask me, and ask me not, hey, how do you think I did? Give me a specific question on what part of this presentation did you want specific feedback on? I think that's how you set the culture. That's what I've done in the past. It seemed to work.
In creating like an open space, right, where it's feel comfortable to come speak to me, come ask me questions. I'm here.
Nothing's personal. Yep.
Exactly. Before I let you guys hop off, Lindsay, I would like to just get your thoughts on this as well before we part ways. In terms of feedback, what have you been able to kind of create?
I would say everything Chris and Catherine said. For the sake of time, the one thing I would add is asking them how they like to receive feedback. You'd be surprised that some people like to receive feedback written. Some people like to receive it verbally. And so finding out the way in which they like to receive feedback for me has been really valuable. I use work patterns to deliver feedback. I do videos for them, or I'll do written feedback, or I'll give it verbally. And you'll be surprised that they'll write back and give you feedback as well. And that's really been helpful.
Awesome. I
love that.
Yeah, me too. That's great. Okay, guys. Well, we are at time. Chris, Catherine, and Lindsay, thank you so much for taking the hour to speak with us and bless us with your knowledge. I learned a ton. I know our attendees did as well. So again, I do want to thank Ambition for sponsoring this webinar. Go check them out. Go link with Chris or any of these panelists. If you have any further questions, I'm sure if you get them on LinkedIn, send them a message. They'll be happy to answer. And yeah, thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it, and really looking forward to doing it again soon.